and we're just going to give it a minute here.
All right.
And we are live. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Best Phone Plans Podcast. Today, Dennis and I are joined by Chris. Chris is the founder of CoverageCritic, a website that explains wireless concepts, provides recommendations, and actually, Chris, why don't you tell us a little bit more about your site and kind of what you're doing? I feel like you cover a lot. So yeah, how would you describe kind of what you're doing and how you got into it?
Yeah, thanks guys. Thanks for having me here. So yeah, basically I started this website Coverage Critic because I felt like it was just like if you tried to like Google to answer questions about the wireless industry, find a good phone plan, a lot of the information you'd find was like really low quality, had all sorts of like conflicts of interest that nobody really told you about. So I thought like, why don't I make something better? Why don't I try to like solve some of the confusion here? And like sort of right off the bat, the thing I like wanted to commit to was like be a little rigorous than other people, be more transparent than you were finding other places. So, one of the things I did right off the bat was like create a web page at coveragecritic.com/transparency where I just explained like these are all my conflicts of interest, not just like where do I have conflicts of interest, but like what do they actually look like? If I work with a company, you can see on that page like exactly the kind of like commission I might get if somebody buys a phone plan on my recommendation. That was the idea. Dive deeper, create tools for people to like help find better plans and make sense of the whole space.
Yeah, and I think that's like an important element. I mean, like my website, your website, Whistle Out, like pretty much all cell phone comparison websites, like the whole model behind that is help people find an affordable cell phone plan that meets their needs, but you also typically are able to partner with a lot of the carriers so that the site earns commission based on sales and can kind of fund future development and stuff. So that's really interesting. I'm curious, like, were you just going down a rabbit hole yourself, like trying to find a new phone plan for your needs, or is this something you kind of stumbled across? Like, this is such a niche topic, I feel like. So I'm just curious, like, what led you down the path to realize, a lot of information out there wasn't up to par with what you were looking for?
Yeah, so I think for like years I'd kind of like in the back of my mind been like, something's broken here. Like everybody I know seems to be paying 3 times as much as they need to. They could be on like a way cheaper plan. And then as I was like looking to sort of like switch my sort of work I was doing a few years ago, I felt like there were a lot of these industries that were like kind of screwed up where like you could throw better information out there. And it wasn't so much that like I had some huge passion for cell phone service. It's just like when I started digging into things, looking at, I think all sorts of industries are confusing. Insurance is really confusing. All of these things that are sort of like abstract instead of being like a physical thing you could like hold in your hands and review. And after just like digging into it for a while, I decided like, cell phone service is one of the biggest messes with like the fewest people trying to work on it, which I think you probably like realized something similar too, is
Yeah.
you started getting your stuff started. And so yeah, over time I just realized like, nah, cell phone service, that's the right thing to go after.
Yeah, sweet. Well, we super appreciate it, and the site name is Coverage Critic, and I know you've been working really hard on this epic new tool where you go to the site, it's on the homepage, you enter your zip code, and the site immediately spits out what network has the best coverage in your area and offers some recommended affordable cell phone plans. I'm curious to kind of dive into a little bit of that and like what you've been working on. Where did the idea for this tool come from?
Yeah, absolutely. So I felt like that was like one big pain point for people. Like, if somebody's deciding to switch plans and they've had trouble with coverage in the past, it can be like a little tough to figure out. Like, all right, is AT&T the right call? Is Verizon the right call? And there weren't great resources about that. You could like sort of try to go to every carrier's website, load all their coverage maps, but it was kind of hard to like compare across them. And can you even really believe the coverage map? And so I realized that the FCC, they collect a bunch of data from everybody who runs a network in the U.S. And then they make that freely available. And it's the kind of thing that like a normal person couldn't make sense of. It's like, or at least not quickly anyway. It's like 10 million rows of data covering every little piece of the U.S. And I realized that you could kind of churn out something from that would spit out for every city, every zip code, some predictions about coverage. And I'm pretty happy with how the tool turned out. It's like definitely short of perfect right now, but I'm like really optimistic that it's just gonna get better and better over time. I think like the FCC is hoping to put pressure on networks to make this data better. So like each time they refresh this data, which I think they try to do like once or twice a year, each time that happens, I think I'm just going to rebuild the model. It'll get a little better, and maybe I'll be able to like pull in some data from other sources, other people who are trying to figure out how well networks perform.
So you actually read my mind. I was going to ask you, like, what API were you tying into to get the data? So you're getting it directly from the FCC's data set then?
Yeah, and the story is, I think the FCC wants to have this data to figure out, like, if they're gonna, subsidize cell phone like network build outs in maybe like rural areas or underserved areas. They want to have like good data about like what's the coverage situation actually look like. And so they like also made that data just sort of available to use. And yeah, I mean that's been great that that's out there.
Have you thought about working with some of like the third party? Because right now with the FCC data, if memory serves me correctly, I believe it's all self-reported by the carriers, which has made it inherently a little bit inaccurate. So have you thought about working with companies like, say, Rudimetrics or OpenSignal or third party places like that where they're getting the device information from the devices that people use to help kind of tie it all together in a nice, accurate manner?
Yeah, that's a great point, and you're totally right about that self-reporting issue. So I think that like there actually is some stuff in there that like as I've dived into it, like it seems like AT&T overstates its coverage substantially. And one nice thing is that I'm able to adjust for that to like some degree. But I mean, and nothing I can do is perfect. And so yeah, I mean, I love the idea of trying to incorporate more and more of these data sources over time. I mean, Root Metrics is great. OpenSignal could be really good too. I mean, they've got some great data on like speeds and performance. Where like right now, what I have is a little more limited to coverage. So I would love to do that eventually. It would just be do these big companies want to work with me? And I think right now I'm a little bit of a small fish in the pond, but hopefully as this thing grows, they'll be more and more tempted to kind of collaborate with me.
No, to clarify, I think it's an incredible tool. I found it very interesting, and the reason why I mentioned the idea of kind of like synergizing with all the data points is because like lots of people have done these coverage tools in the past, but there's always some weakness that they have, right? Like OpenSignal, I would argue, doesn't have a very large base compared to, say, Ookla's speed test with how many speed tests to get generated. Mm-hmm. So they're not getting enough data to be accurate, or at the very least, the data points in which they're being accurate in urban markets, which aren't necessarily the ones that need to be focused on the most, right? Mm-hmm. Rudimetrics, they're paying to cover so many X amount of markets, but that's a variable amount of time. Like we said about the FCC, at least as it stands today, it's just carriers essentially doing their own coverage maps and like reporting like, hey, we have it here. So that's why I was thinking this would be a unique opportunity for you, not only to combine the data to be accurate for showing the coverage, but also because you are the most transparent about, well, maybe I shouldn't use that wording, but you're very transparent about everything that you do with your transparency page, and you make really good recommendations that tend to focus on saving the people money and explaining like why, which is a unique perspective that a lot of these different companies sometimes don't think about. You take a different little niche to the approach.
Yeah, mm-hmm. I think you actually kind of tie everything together in some sense where you're providing the coverage tool and you're providing the plan recommendation, where I think a lot of the other bigger resources are focused like just on coverage or just on data speeds. So you're kind of synergizing everything into one space. And yeah, I almost wish, Chris, you could come out with an app so we could use that and like give you all the data directly. Just like get rid of the big guys, bypass that.
Are you hosting it on like your own like web server, or are you just like passing it off to like a third party, like say like a Squarespace or something to handle?
So like the sort of like the biggest, the whole like underlying raw data I have sort of like locally in a database, and then the stuff that people are viewing is it's just living on my web server. I mean, I think it'd be awesome if this thing like grows over time. I would love it if like eventually it could be like rather than entering a city or a zip code, you could type in your address and see like, okay, at my house, it'd be sweet if I could just give people reliable data of like, this is exactly the coverage you'll get from each network. Right now the data is just not there, which is unfortunate because you can have it where one part of Chicago might have like very different coverage characteristics than somewhere 2 miles in any direction. But yeah, I think over time as the data gets better, it'll be easier and easier to build out better tools. And I would really be excited to be a part of that.
Yeah. So I guess, Chris, as someone who's been following the network so closely, like, do you feel the coverage maps they display are accurate? And, as the title of this podcast kind of indicates, who do you feel ultimately does have the best coverage right now? So maybe let's start with the map accuracy. What are your thoughts on that?
Not accurate. For sure not accurate.
No hesitation. This is complete BS.
Definitely they're misleading, and it's also like not even a clear-cut thing where it's not really the case that like you get coverage in a spot or you don't, but there's all sorts of shades of gray there. Like you might get a weak signal, or you might be able to get a good signal if you're outside in that spot, but a much weaker one if you're inside. And I think on all of the carrier coverage maps, the networks are always giving themselves the benefit of the doubt. They're always overestimating their own coverage, and I think some of them have tried to like sort of start doing a little bit of like differentiation, like maybe on T-Mobile's where they have stronger signal, you have a darker color of pink, where they have coverage. But to their credit, it's not just them being misleading, but it's actually like kind of hard to figure out coverage. It's hard to model it, and how good coverage is on a clear day versus a rainy day could be like pretty different. So there's an actual hard problem underlying it, even if I think that it's kind of bogus how the networks present themselves.
Yeah. I mean, I wish I know there's so much data. Like I'm running so many speed tests in the Ookla speed test app, and I know like so many people watching this stream right now or listening later, they're super into running speed tests. And I wish there was a way we could just like aggregate this in a cohesive manner. Like right now it seems like, all right, Ookla's got their data, like their pool of data. You're using what the FCC publicly has. I'm sure OpenSignal is using their own data that they get from their app. And like, I just wish there was a way to really aggregate it and build it into one cohesive model that would really benefit everyone and, and provide the best information. Do you think the coverage isn't accurate? Maybe the third party networks are providing better coverage, but who would you say actually does have the best network right now?
Oh, I think to give like a simple single answer, Verizon is clear winner for sure. And then of course, like the real answer, if you want to like get nuanced about it, is it depends. It depends on the person.
Market specifically. Let's focus on your market specifically, where you're at.
We're, at this very moment, I'm in Chicago right now, and I think that this is a good example. It's just like in the middle of like a dense city like Chicago, all the major networks are typically going to offer decent coverage. I mean, there's of course like little exceptions to that, but yeah, coverage becomes more and more of an issue as you move to rural areas, get into less dense places. But I think Verizon there's a lot of different ways you can sort of like slice the data, but for sure on like square miles covered, people covered, Verizon's the winner. And then if you want to like look at speeds, it's a little more complicated a story. But one of the big things I try to advocate is like, it's not important that you have really high max speeds. It's even average speeds are kind of overrated. What you really don't want is having like super low speeds.
What are those speed thresholds to you?
Yeah, like what's average to you?
So it's I think that like for most things people do on their phones, if you're getting more than 10 megabits per second, you're going to be able to do everything you want, unless you have some really unusual use case or you're downloading it, a giant file for 1 second. Most of the time, 10 megabits per second, you're going to be fine. Even at 3, like you might not even notice. It depends what you're doing. There's definitely use cases where like that's a problem, but and especially like streaming high def video for sure that starts to be an issue. But I think people don't realize that like a lot of where they really have a pain point where they notice like this web page is taking forever to load. That's when they're going below 3. The problem isn't that they had 20 megabits per second when they could have been on a 5G connection that was 10 times faster. That's not even a thing that like matters in everyday life most of the time. And of course, things get totally different if instead of using a phone, you're trying to like connect your laptop or, something else to the network.
Sure. Yeah. That sounds really reasonable. For Verizon, for their network, are you giving that award to their LTE network? Are you taking into consideration their 5G network? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I like to like throw them all together. Okay. And right now 5G it's overrated and it'll become more and more important over time. But I think it's a bit silly. Like T-Mobile right now is running these huge ad campaigns of like, look, we have the best 5G network, most miles covered. These 3 people gave us, the gold star for biggest 5G network. And at some level they're right, but they're just hiding that they have the worst LTE network. And that's actually
a fair point. Yeah.
Yeah. And that's, still more important for most people. Most people don't have 5G phones yet. So yeah, it's all all a little bit silly at how this stuff gets marketed.
So we actually had a super chat that I want to bring up from Austin. He asked, have you seen any upgrades in your area, whether that be speed increases or coverage?
So I'm just looking at that green toboggan question and now getting curious.
I'm ignoring that part because I'm thinking he refers to the green beanie I was wearing a couple episodes, I believe, but I'm
Actually,
not.
no, Chris, we want to know where your green toboggan is. Sorry, I didn't tell you about that before the show.
Yeah, so in my area, for sure with the rollouts of 5G, there's been like some definitely noticeable stuff recently where like 5G. So I live in Boulder, Colorado, and like recently I've seen 5G rolling in there. Actually, like where I'm at the moment in Chicago, actually just down the street, there's a millimeter wave 5G.
Oh, no way!
Yeah, there's a small cell like right near here, and so that's all new and it's kind of fun, and especially like working in this industry, it's great. At the end of the day, like I'm not sure these are really bringing like huge improvements to everyday users of the network.
Yeah,
Man,
I think
you
it's
need to get the
well, I think it's very specific. Like if for some reason you're maybe like our friend Sneed and you're getting the Verizon like fixed wireless internet, I think that's a use case where it's game changing. But I think for, as you mentioned, like for most people, yeah, this isn't really doing anything for them. It's just those niche use cases where it really does make a difference.
And I was just going to bring that up, Stetson. I was going to say, if you live right next to that millimeter wave, so you should be getting Verizon's home internet. Get 3 gigabit per second down and probably like 100 up. Like,
yeah. All right, Dennis. Any improvements in your market? You're about to move home, so maybe I don't know if you'll be in a different area there and get different
I'm moving
speeds.
a whole whopping like quarter of a mile, not a quarter mile, like half a mile. Like, I'm not moving that far from my apartment complex, but no, I mean, actually, believe it or not, the little bit of distance I am moving makes a substantial difference in coverage. As far as upgrades are concerned, I mean, I saw N70, or I almost said N71, N41 being deployed in sites that had N41 being upgraded. So I've been seeing like 80 by 80 and 60 by 60 from
Sweet.
T-Mobile, and then AT&T had the Band 25 deployments. And I don't know what's going on with Verizon because outside of my U.S. mobile line that I was testing, I didn't really have that much to play with. So
no, I definitely feel that, and I would say like with the rollout of 5G, and I'm in Longmont, so I feel like in Longmont there's been two sides to this story. There's been an improvement for T-Mobile customers, but I think on Verizon, people who got 5G actually got a decrease in speeds because when I've been testing them, the ping time is better, but the overall speeds are slower on 5G.
Oh, that's a bummer.
Yeah. And then the big one for me, which I don't know, I think I tweeted out, but I may not have. I actually just got N41 in my apartment. T-Mobile upgraded a cell site like right down the street from me. It hits my apartment. I'm pulling in like easy over 200, sometimes 300 megabits per second over the cell site.
do a speed test.
Which is nuts. Let me see. I think I have to actually, yep, this one's got it. We'll do a speed test here live for you on the show for anyone who's watching, and we'll read it out. So wait, this is a previous one. Over 500 down. Yeah, I literally like, walked outside to test that, and I'll adjust the brightness here.
Do you
so
have
can
this
see
problem,
it.
Austin?
Look at that. That is nuts. So anyway,
All
T-Mobile in Longmont has been doing a tremendous job, I feel like, improving the signal strength, the coverage, and the network capacity with band N41. And I think this makes T-Mobile home internet much more of a viable option for me personally. And
yeah, that's great.
Yeah, that's really exciting to see.
And Austin, I was just making a joke. Do you have that problem? I don't know if you saw. I had like 3 phones that showed up, and I know Stetson's got like 4 on his desk. Do you have that issue?
Oh yeah, I gotcha. Yeah. Oh, I've even got the Palm Mini here. Showing that very badly, but that's a fun one. Yeah, definitely got a big collection that I've accumulated over the last couple of years.
That is definitely a throwback. On a quick side note, before we move on in topics, there was something I wanted to bring up real fast, Stetson, to Chris. When you were collecting your data for your website, it had me think about something from my college days, and I thought this would be kind of fun that you could probably do easily. I had to take a social media mining class, and one of the things I did for my final project was I set up a web crawl on Twitter's like developers account.
Mhm.
and I made it search in an area to see people's tweets about which carriers were like the worst, like which ones they were complaining, or just comments related to hashtag T-Mobile or whoever. And I compiled that, and I made a little coverage map with just people's tweets.
That's awesome. I love that.
That's so
Yeah.
cool. That is.
It made me think of that project when we were talking about his coverage thing. But if you wanted to have like a unique, funny spin on it, that would be a pretty easy way to collect some data, because people comment all the time on Twitter.
Yeah.
Like
That is amazing.
I had to narrow it down just to like State College, because I remember I was using like a really crappy 4-core like i7 4790K to do the crawl at the time. I mean it's not crappy, but it was only 4 cores, so it took a little bit of time. And I think to get all the data that I wanted, well, to get accurate data and process and like clean it up, it probably took like 2 days of just sifting through all this stuff with the processing power that I had available to me, because like I had like over like 300,000 tweets to sift through or something like that.
Yeah, that's a lot of data to crawl through. I love that idea, though. I've seen versions of this before, but I really like the idea of like adding in the location piece to it. I mean, especially for cell service where the location piece really matters. Yeah, that would be fun. I think there would be a lot of angry comments.
You actually probably only get angry comments.
Yeah, I don't think anybody's like, Verizon, great service in Longmont. Like, I love you.
Yeah, but that could be part of the funny part, right?
It's really you have to do inverse ranking. It's like whoever is complained about the least is actually probably okay.
Yeah, I think that must be it. Yeah, silence is a really good signal in that situation.
Sweet. All right, so Austin, thank you for the super chat talking about network upgrades and coverage. To close that out, I ended up getting 305 megabits per second down and 14.7 up on N41. So I'm excited about that. All right, and I think we talked a lot about coverage. Chris, another one of your, I feel like one of your biggest contributions, or at least one of my favorite contributions, has been your network priority and QCI value page, where you kind of outline, what it means to have network priority, to be prioritized, to be deprioritized, and what these QCI values are. How did you get into this? How did you first learn about QCI values? Like, I didn't even know this existed until I saw your website.
Yeah, so I think this probably is like one of the more useful things I've done with CoverageCritic, where when I started out, it seemed like there was this idea out there that some phone plans are prioritized over others. And the basic idea there is like if a network is congested, rather than treating every user of the network as equal, some people will get like higher data speeds than others, and maybe like a more premium plan will be higher priority than a budget-friendly plan. And I was just amazed when I got into this that everybody seemed to have contradictory ideas. There were people who seemed like they were in the industry, or even people that I knew worked for a carrier, saying things that were just like totally mutually incompatible. And so I felt like, okay, I need to sort through this. Like there has to be some answer here. I have no idea why everybody seems so confused about it. So I started just like, whenever people seemed to kind of know what they were talking about on, say, like Reddit or some other environment, I kind of try to like dig in a little bit, ask them why they thought what they thought, and see how much sense they were making. And then at the same time, I started reading into there's certain like legal disclosures that a lot of carriers and networks publish. So I just started like combing through that and trying to make sense of like, okay, if I take the legal disclosure at face value, what does that mean about priority? And then I started reading there's a company that like has this sort of like central specification for how LTE networks should work. And I started reading through their like technical documents to figure out like, okay, how is priority supposed to work according to the specifications? And anyway, a huge rabbit hole. But by the time I'd like spent some time doing that and tried to connect some dots, I had like a really good working model of like how this actually works, or at least I'm pretty confident that I got the right answers here. And then I found that with a cool app called Network Signal Guru that you can't run it on every phone. You need to have a rooted Android phone with a certain kind of hardware, but that you could actually find these QCI values using that app for different plans. And so then I just like started collecting this database of actual tests showing what kind of QCIs I found for different plans. And Stetson, thank you so much for contributing to that database. I mean, you're almost half the entries now. I'm probably due for an update to throw some of the screenshots you've sent me over the last several weeks. So
yeah, I just
appreciate
found
that.
It so interesting. So what does QCI mean for people who may be less familiar with that?
Yeah, so I don't want to get too deep in the weeds here, but it's sort of like a high level. It stands for quality of service class indicator, and it's just a tool for LTE networks, but there's something pretty similar for 5G. And basically, this is a sort of it's a value that's associated with data use, and for the sort of usual data use. So let's say you're maybe like browsing the web, downloading an app, streaming video, you'll usually have a value between like 6 and 9 as the QCI. And the general rule is like on any network in that 6 to 9 range, lower QCI means higher priority. And then it gets really wonky if you get into the weeds there of like how do different networks set it up. Certain things aren't under that. So like a voice call is automatically higher priority data than any kind of regular phone data you'd use in other ways. That's sort of the basic story without going too deep.
Yeah, I mean, let me ask this: do you think it even matters QCI value for you, Chris?
Yeah. So, this is always a tough question, and it's also one of these it depends answers. The thing that I think a lot of people like underrate is that networks most of the time they're not under a heavy load in most places. And so it just is kind of like, it is not costly for me to like burn another gigabyte on Verizon's network in a random time and place. But if the network is congested, suddenly that changes a lot. Me trying to like use a gigabyte of data could really affect other people's performance. The network can be really congested. And like any kind of data use somebody's doing makes everybody else's data use slower. So it's really location specific, is even like time of day specific. And so what I tell people a lot is just like these budget plans with low priority data, they work fine for most people in most places. Just try one, and if you like it, if you don't notice any consequences, like stick with it and save a bunch of money every month. But if you don't like it, like just then switch to something more premium. But I do think for sure, like there are areas where, if you have a congested cell site pretty regularly and you use a lot of data, you might hate being on a deprioritized plan.
Yeah, the reason I ask is because like I go back and forth on it. Like when I talk to Stetson and I see his results on Mint, I'm like, oh wow, yeah. I mean, I guess being the highest possible priority doesn't matter too much. And then when I think about congested cell sites, like if a cell site's congested and everybody's having a poor experience, priority or not, it'll be the difference of like maybe a couple megabits, if that, right? If the site's actually like really bad. Then on the other hand, like. I think about Verizon and how aggressive they are specifically because they seem to be the most aggressive. And it's almost like Verizon almost makes it like if you're on like one of their deprioritized plans, you're like a second class citizen on their network. like you don't get to have any usable service like at all. Unless it's like non-peak hours. And I say that because when I was testing out US Mobile with their Super LTE in my market, Verizon performed very poorly in a shocking manner that I was surprised by, at least in my specific area of testing when I was doing so. So I just wanted to get your thoughts on it.
Yeah, and it is really hard to make sense of like how big an issue is this? Where is it an issue? I really wish that there was more data out there. I really wish like the FCC gave some guidance to networks to like encourage them to make this whole thing more transparent.
They can't. I mean, they literally can't. I mean, even if they did have like some set standards, like me and Stetson have talked about this a little bit, but like T-Mobile doesn't have like a very sophisticated network core. So even if the FCC wrote out some guidelines, T-Mobile wouldn't be able to execute on it. It's either like priority or it's not with T-Mobile, and it's more application based more than anything. Like what you were talking about with voice being the highest priority. That's kind of how T-Mobile does it, right? Like voice highest priority, and then I want to say it's like video calling is like second, and then like X, Y, and Z. And then there's just a deprioritized bucket that's like the same for everybody, which is why when Stetson does his reviews on T-Mobile Prepaid's unlimited plan, you're getting priority access. Like there's not some special QCI value just specifically for prepaid customers.
Yeah. So T-Mobile is unique in that their prepaid is not below their postpaid. Though at least if I'm right, actually Metro and Mint would be even below T-Mobile's name branded customers. And and it looks to me like there's actually an even further like lower
Yeah.
data bucket for Go ahead, Stetson.
When I tested T-Mobile and I did side-by-side tests, I found 4 levels, and they utilized all the QCI tiers. So I found Magenta customers and Magenta Max, or the Magenta Plus. That was tier 1 QCI 6. Then, and also prepaid was up there as well. Exact same performance. Tier 2 was all your MVNOs, Metro, Mint Mobile, and I think we had T-Mobile Essentials in there as well. And then Tier 3 was hotspot data, and then Tier 4 at the very bottom was for heavier data users. So there could be a point, like if you used over 50 gigs on T-Mobile, you would be bumped from Tier 1 or Tier 2 all the way down to Tier 4 and actually get potentially slower speeds than the prepaid customers or the people on the MVNOs.
Yeah, so that like hierarchy matches my impressions. And I think Dennis, like you made a great point there. About like, even if they wanted to share this data, it might not really be possible. And I think you're right about that. And actually, I want to give credit to T-Mobile, where in their legal disclosures, they actually they explain that hierarchy more clearly than I think any of the other big operators explain their prioritization policies. So yeah, I think you're right actually that it would be not even possible to like share that data. But if even there's just like guidance to like write a transparent document that a normal person can read that just explains things, I think like could be helpful, or there's even like other angles that could go at this. So like root metrics, if they wanted to, they could collect data on like both high priority and low priority plans for each network. They don't do that, and I'm suspicious they don't do that because there's not money in that for them.
Well, I was gonna say when we had who was it from PC Mag? That's refresh me.
Sasha. We had Sasha Segan from PC Mag.
He was telling us about how speed test or Ookla actually has like a developer version of the speed test app for people like him that's like pimped out to like all like it shows you the QCI values, it shows you everything. So I would imagine that if they wanted to, all they'd have to do is flip a switch from a software update standpoint, and boom, there you go.
I would love to see the software those groups are working with. And the thing that really like bugs me, and I at some level I get it, but there's so much money changing hands between the network evaluators and the networks they evaluate, and that I think it has a lot more effect on how they run their businesses than would be ideal, and it's kind of a mess. But I would love to see them trying to share more info about how the whole process works.
Chris, we got a super chat from Mark. Mark, thank you for your support. He's saying, keep up the great work, Chris. The more pressure we can get on carriers to give us accurate coverage benefits all consumers. So really, really big fan there.
Thank you, Mark. I really appreciate that.
My question is, do you think prioritization matters more on certain networks than others? I think we touched on this a little bit with Verizon, but what's your take on that?
Yeah, I think that's probably right. Then I think the sort of like in like the Reddit community for this stuff, I think that the general opinion is that Verizon is particularly bad. AT&T often actually they've got a kind of mixed thing but it seems like they have less trouble with low priority than Verizon, and so yeah, that's for sure a thing. It's hard to there's no hard data on this.
Yeah.
I think my own impression matches what seems to be like most people's impression. But it's a little hard to say. The Verizon, it makes sense that the Verizon would have the biggest issue here. They have more demand on the network in most places, just because they've got more lines. They're clearly more spectrum constrained than any of the other operators. So if they have the biggest congestion issues, that makes sense to me. So I think it's probably right that they deprioritize harder. And T-Mobile's in a pretty great spectrum position. So even though I don't think they do great on nationwide coverage, they might be doing a lot better on how congested they are in big cities.
Yeah. I think I generally agree with that. I think from the comments I've seen, it sounds like more people are having problems on the Verizon network with congestion. Like, as you mentioned, they literally have the most people on their network. They, instead of opting to buy more spectrum early on, they decided to densify their network with cell sites, which could be good in the future. But right now, it just means there's a lot of people all connected to these cell sites with not a whole lot of spectrum to service those needs. So I think in some major cities, I think they can be the biggest issue. AT&T in their investor day presentation mentioned that I think they're only operating at like 70% capacity. So I think they're probably fine. And T-Mobile, I honestly haven't really noticed it, but if people have other experiences, I'd be curious to hear them like in the comments and stuff like that.
T-Mobile?
Yeah, Dennis, what's your take?
Okay, so my take is this. AT&T, right now at least, God tier, across the board. That FirstNet deal was the capital investment they needed to like make things happen. Like this whole one-touch policy that they've been doing where they go to every single site and basically deck it out with all the bells and whistles has been great. I mean, you guys have seen my speed tests. Verizon, with the C-band spectrum they acquired and all the money they're throwing at this, is going to be a force to be reckoned with. T-Mobile is a wild card. Right now, T-Mobile still being the T-Mobile of like 3 years ago. In short, meaning not good. They're cutting corners. They're not putting in backup sites when they go to places. They're not deploying the full amount of spectrum that they have allocated to themselves when they visit that cell site. So now it's going to require a different visit to get all the proper antennae or whatever else that needs to be deployed. They're not upgrading backhaul on sites that they did add 80 megahertz and 41, which is why you sometimes see lackluster speeds that are only like 200 meg when theoretically you should be getting up to like 700. So T-Mobile is a wait to be seen. I mean, they have potential. As Sneed said in one of his videos, like T-Mobile has bullets, right? They got all the ammunition they need. They just need people and guns to fire them with. And right now that's the cell sites, right? Like they have plenty of cell sites. In fact, I think they actually have more than Verizon, but a lot of them are redundant ones that they acquire from Sprint. And they're not positioned in such a manner where you're having like every quarter of a mile there's a cell site to handle off to, which is why like T-Mobile's some basic stuff with T-Mobile like call quality is so terrible sometimes depending on where you go. Which Stetson, I know in the back of your head you're probably laughing and you said like who makes a phone call anymore, but it is something I do pretty frequently, especially with the whole talking to my loan officer. So anyway, that was my side tangent. Basically, I think AT&T is God. I actually think that you're on the minority, at least in our audience, in regards to Verizon, though, Chris. Although I'd be curious to see what people say in the comments.
Yeah, no, I think, yeah, it depends on location, but either way, I'm excited for C-band to be deployed and to hopefully get faster speeds for everyone. Chris, I guess I'm curious. We didn't really put this in the notes, but I'm curious your take on some of the things that have been happening in the industry recently, the Sprint T-Mobile merger. How do you feel that's going? And Dish. I'm always curious to hear what people think about Dish and kind of what they're up to.
Yeah. So I mean, on the merger thing, I think it's going to be bad for consumers. All this stuff is like sort of chaotic and hard to predict, but I think like if you look at like the history of telecom mergers, especially the big ones, it's hard to argue that like consumers come out ahead. I'm less sure about like the sort of like legal how the antitrust stuff works, if it should have been blocked or not. I don't have a firm position on.
Okay.
But I will be surprised if we feel like in 5 years this was actually a really good call. Boost. Dish is going to be a wild card there, though. But I mean, there's something that is just really funny about the whole thing, where part of the way this merger got through was saying that Sprint couldn't be a viable competitor, but somehow Dish, who had no network, could be, which it just is wild and insane. And if you look at like the disclosures and like the documents that the things people said as they were getting this thing through, I mean, all of it's so much of it's garbage, so much of it is dishonest. And the real thing that I think is a real tell is as far as I can tell, AT&T and Verizon didn't really even push back on the merger, which I think is a pretty strong sign that that they kind of like they did a really lazy effort to push back in like really tiny ways. But I think that's like a pretty clear sign that this is making the industry less competitive. The Dish thing is weird. I don't know what to think. It seems like people who've been in this industry longer than I have are all convinced that Dish is the strangest wildcard company that lies even more than anyone else in this industry. I mean, it does seem to me though like they actually are planning to at least kind of build a network. And if they do, that could be pretty cool to have like a greenfield network. I think this relates to something Dennis was saying earlier, that like a lot of the systems the networks are built on sound like, as far as I can tell, and I'm not really like deep on this stuff, but they sound pretty like archaic and hard to manage. And I think there is something to be said for if you throw sort of modern software, modern tech across the whole network, across all of the like customer management stuff. Maybe you could do something great, but I have no idea what to expect, and I'm excited to see what happens.
I mean, the
Do you guys have takes on that?
Yeah, I mean, the ultimate goal for any network, it's more on your last point. The ultimate goal for any network is you want to get to a point of efficiency. Like, I know we always get jazzed up about seeing like super fast speed tests, like getting like 300 megabits per second down, but that is inherently, I don't want to call it flawed, but not an efficient way to utilize the limited spectrum that's there. Like, if we could get to a point of on-demand access, so I want to watch a 4K video on Netflix. It requires 25 megabits per second. Then I get 25 megabits per second, or maybe 30 as a small buffer to watch said video. Like, you want to get it down to that thing. In fact, when we had Roger Etner on, we lightly touched on this ever so lightly with, what was it?
Spectrum network slicing.
Network slicing. Thank you. That is going to be like the end-all be-all future for the carriers, because realistically speaking, these auctions that we're getting are very like political. Like, whether the government decides they want to free up spectrum to use for commercial uses, or if they want to hold it all for like the big old military industrial complex, seems to swing depending on the administrations that's there. And depending on the time. Like, the only reason why we got to see all this most recent spectrum get released is because love him or hate him, Trump had like a whole competition with China to go 5G, get 5G ready, right? So, and they wanted that sweet, sweet taxpayer money. But yeah, I think we're gonna get to a point here where there's not gonna be much more spectrum coming about that could be used, or at least realistically viable for the usage of cell phone coverage. So we're gonna have to look at better ways to make use of that limited spectrum, and that's gonna be the path forward, is getting to that point.
Interesting. Yeah, I think. Yeah. To kind of guide that a little bit more towards Dish, I think they're in a unique position where, Chris, as you mentioned, they can build everything from the ground up. They can skip 4G. They can go straight to 5G, build everything with a virtualized 5G network core, get everything operationally efficient from the start. And they also have really good spectrum holdings. I know Charlie Ergen has just been gobbling up spectrum and holding on to it for quite a while now. So I think the potential is there. My biggest concern is the execution. How is this actually going to manifest? What is it going to turn into for consumers? How is the pricing going to be? And yeah, like, is it actually going to be good and worth signing up for? I'm optimistic on Dish because they acquired Ting, and I know Ting is known for good customer service. So I think Dish could pull the customer service tools that I think were built in-house by Ting to kind of service their customers. And I'm optimistic about their spectrum holdings, but just Dish as a company, you don't really associate them as having positive customer service. So I don't know. And I'm concerned their CapEx spend is pretty low. I think, Dennis, what did they say? Like $10 billion in the next 3 years
for everything. And that's what Verizon's spending just on C-band deployment.
Yeah. So I'm just concerned they're not putting enough into this to really make it the fourth biggest wireless carrier. It sounds more like a localized network or something like that.
I mean, if they can get like Amazon, so to speak, behind them with their sweet, money bags and all that behind the scenes infrastructure with like AWS and stuff like that, then Dish could be real scary and possible. But as it stands right now, they're not a threat at all. In fact, I see them looking at like a buyout option here, like the next 4 years. They don't really start getting it in the gear. As far as their spectrum, it's not actually that good in my opinion. A lot of it's not contingent. A lot of it's all over the place, and it's going to be hard to utilize. And remember, Stetson, because they're so new to the game, they're going to basically be needing people to have new devices. Like, they're not going to just be able to be like, bring over your old iPhone 6 to me, right? They're going to need like
yeah. I guess that's true. Like, they would have to build a 4G network in order to get 4G customers on board.
Yeah, which would be stupid to do, right? You want to just go right into 5G, right? So
yeah, I can definitely.
Yeah, and they do have I think they've got, what is it, like 7 years from the time of the merger that they have like good rates on their sort of like MVNO contract to run over the new T-Mobile network. So they might find a way to have that like carry them over until they can have pretty much everybody on a 5G device anyway. But yeah, I mean, there's so much up in the air. I I'm also, I mean, network build out's way out of my wheelhouse.
Hard to tell what even to think about that. Chris, another thing you do with your site is you kind of recommend phone plans. I'm kind of curious, like, what phone plans do you think are some of the best right now, and maybe what phone plans do you think could be way better?
Yeah. So I'm a big fan of Mint. If T-Mobile's network is a good fit for where you are, I mean, Mint just is amazing on pricing, and I think they do, given how low their price is, a decent job on the sort of customer support, customer experience stuff. On the sort of like more I mean, if we want to go really negative, I'm like I am really not a fan of Red Pocket. I think that they come up a lot in some of the communities you and I are part of, Stetson, and I am just amazed that the customer support is as bad as it is, and as best as I can tell is I haven't just got unlucky, but that like lots of people have had horrible experiences with them. I think like if they could work on that one, they're doing well on the pricing front. If they could pull off sort of a better customer experience, that would be cool. And I love the idea of how many different plans they have, how many different networks they have.
It's almost, I'm torn between like, is that good or is it confusing? Because then all of a sudden, like, you're going to sign up for a plan, you need to figure out like, all right, what does GSM-T mean? Like, they're not really allowed to say it's the T-Mobile network, but they kind of made it pink or magenta, so you would kind of get this idea.
That is a mess and definitely confusing for people.
But the flexibility is great for sure. And I know you had mentioned backstage you kind of had a hot take on US Mobile. What has been your experience with that?
Yeah, so I want to love US Mobile. I really want to like them. I think there's a lot that's like really impressive about them. I mean, they're killing it on prices. They were doing fine on prices, and then they like slashed them, and then they like 2 months later slashed them again. Like I couldn't believe how quickly they made that happen. And I haven't like dived as deep into their customer support quality as I'd like, but after talking to somebody there, I'm mostly convinced that they actually like have a pretty good thing set up where they found a way to have like really good support agents without like massively increasing their costs. So I think that's like really exciting, but their marketing really bugs me.
What
think it's
bothers you about it?
So what about it? I think that like, you always expect the marketing to, cast the brand in a good light, but I think US Mobile's has been like pretty customer unfriendly, and some of it has bordered on just like outright deceptive. So one of the really silly, so and they've also switched up their plans, so I'm forgetting how much of this is like still relevant, but they used to one of the ways they had lower prices was a lot of their plans were throttled. And I think they like had speed tiers, and I might be getting the details wrong here, so like to let me know if you've got them right. But I think it was standard, fast, and ludicrous.
Yep.
And actually, in my mind, ludicrous was standard deprioritized speeds with no throttle. So already ludicrous was kind of slow, I guess you could call it.
Yeah.
Fast was like throttled to, was it 5 megabits?
Yeah,
or
it was
maybe
5 megabits per second.
Was there a standard, or did it just start at fast?
There was a standard that was 1 megabit per second.
Yeah, like it seems pretty silly to me. They also like they had really high taxes and fees. And I think they've got a little more transparent about this, and I like really appreciate that move. But their order process was also kind of funny, where like if a company had high taxes and fees, and then like as soon as you click add to cart and start the buying process, if it showed you like, okay, now you get the $5 this fee and the $6 that fee, it's like annoying, but it's okay. But US Mobile's kind of had this model of like, and maybe they also might have changed this, or there might be ways around it, but they have you like order a SIM card, which kind of like a soft commit, and then you pay for your plan. And I feel like there's something annoying, like after you've kind of like made this decision to get the plan and started the ball rolling, then it's midway through the process that they say, by the way, you're going to pay 25% more than you thought.
I can definitely see how that would sting a little bit. Like you all right, sweet, $15 for 5 gigs. Let's get the SIM card over here. You spend, I don't know, sometimes you can get it for free, but usually it's like $4. It shows up, you go through the process, and all of a sudden you're activating, and the $15 plan turns into almost a $20 plan.
Yeah. And they've made some good moves away, like from where they were a year ago. They're getting more transparent, but it's a funny thing where it's like I love the pricing, even after the taxes and fees, like good pricing.
Yeah, it's so good, yeah.
And it was just a funny thing for me though, where like I work with a friend of mine who like he runs a personal finance site, MrMoneyMustache.com. It's awesome. Everybody listening should check it out. But the ethos of that site is like be frugal, avoid stupid expenditures. And I felt like even after taxes and fees, this is a good carrier. I felt like almost like can I even recommend it to this audience, because there's this just like completely like unforeseen giant fee that I know is going to annoy that audience so much. So I want to love them. I think they're moving in the right direction. I think I will end up loving them as a carrier.
Well, I got good news for you.
Yeah.
At least on their unlimited plans, tax and fees are included now. Ahmed took like our advice, so like that's pro bueno.
Awesome. Nice work. Nice. I'm glad you guys were pressuring them.
Yeah, I mean, that was probably the number one complaint I think I saw on Reddit, and the number one piece of feedback they got. And I can understand as a telecom carrier, it can be challenging to map that out. I mean, it varies from state to state. The regulatory charges are completely different. And I mean, if you sign up, I just signed up for AT&T, and there's this like garbage, just like administrative fee that they throw on there. That like, what does that mean? Is that just AT&T getting more money? Like, it didn't seem like it was going towards any government fund or whatever. So I can definitely understand some of the challenges there, but I think, as you mentioned, just from a consumer perspective, like the experience is so much nicer when like you're signing up for Visible and it says $40, you go to check out and it's just $40. Like, that is beautiful.
I feel like, just to play devil's advocate a little bit here.
Yeah, please do.
Like,
I'm being really harsh right now.
I was gonna say because I was gonna say, first off, I just want to say real quick. Me personally, I told Ahmed that if he did some certain changes and came out with like a better unlimited plan, I would sign up, and I was a man of my word on that. I actually kept it for like 3 months, and my experience with US Mobile was pretty spectacular. From the app to the sign up process, everything about it was the most painless way of like, here's my money. The only thing that could have been made it even easier is if there was like eSIM, but I got a free SIM card, so it was fine. As far as the fees and tax are concerned, I agree. I love tax and fees included. I like that T-Mobile has been doing that forever. It was one of the reasons I actually went on the old OnePlus plan back in the day, because with tax and fees included, it was significantly cheaper than the old Simple Choice plan that I had. And I like that consistency of knowing what my bill is going to be. But there's only a few options out there that have tax and fees, like my Comcast internet bill has taxes and fees. My parents' Armstrong bill has taxes and fees. Like, taxes and fees are everywhere. Like, till death do we, like, who was it that said it? There's two things in life guaranteed: death and taxes. Like, they're everywhere.
Right.
Yeah. The idea of trying to have like a system sometimes just to calculate all those different like taxes is insane. Like, just in Pennsylvania alone, like Pittsburgh, Allegheny County has a 1% higher sales tax than the rest of the state. So it's not just like 6% across the board for the sales tax. It's 7% in Allegheny County, 6% in here. So you have to look at zip codes, for example, when you're making online transactions to determine what that needs to be. And then there's different little other things that come into play with like now recovery fees and all kinds of other stuff. And that's just Pennsylvania. You got 50 states plus U.S. territories to deal with for all of those. And when you're a smaller company like US Mobile was, it might not just be financially feasible or something to invest in at the time. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's a great point. And actually, those local taxes, I almost don't want those local taxes to be baked in, because if you bake those in for something that's available nationally, you kind of end up just giving a subsidy to whichever town is taxing heavily, and then, I mean, that seems not great either. So yeah, definitely there's some hard things there. I guess I just wasn't a big fan of like the fees that were across the board, no matter where you were.
Yeah, it was like a $2 service fee on top of it. Like, why not just include that?
Yeah. And they are right that like, and you are right too, that like all over this industry, there's stuff like that. And I just felt like if you compared them, and I, of course, now we've talked about how they've sort of changed stuff a bit, but 8 months ago, if you compared one of their plans to a similarly priced Mint Mobile plan, which I feel like is kind of the right comparison, Mint's taxes fees were way lower.
Yeah. I think that's good. My big thing with US Mobile, they had this announcement last summer that they were getting 5G, like millimeter wave, 2 gigabits per second. I think the page is still up on their website, and it's been almost a year, and we're like, it's like crickets. Like, what's going on?
Yeah,
I love
they get a little aggressive on their timelines. I'm guilty of that too, though, so I can't fault them too much for that.
Yeah, I think it's true. I think they get excited about it, and I'm excited about it too. I wish they were. I
Well,
don't
if
know.
memory serves me right, isn't
Yeah.
their GSM based already have 5G, but it's the Super LTE that's the problem? Is that or
Yeah,
super,
that's correct. It's millimeter wave on Verizon that we're waiting for.
Yeah.
and they announced it last year, but timeline was a little aggressive, and yeah,
So that might be more of a Verizon problem more than anything, because right now, as far as I'm aware, the only people that have access to like 5G on like that aren't like Verizon specifically are Visible, the cable operators providers like Spectrum Mobile and Xfinity Mobile, and that's about it as far as I'm aware.
yeah, and Verizon prepaid too.
Oh,
So
but that falls
yeah,
into
it's
the
not like
whole-
all Verizon themselves. So we'll have to
That's-
wait and see on that.
yeah.
I think now might be a good time. Austin had a really fun question in the live chat on the stream here, and he says, "Okay, Chris, with your own money, what cell phone plans are you paying for right now, and why?"
Yeah, so I mean, this is a great question. And my answer is ridiculous for this one. So I try to run one of the sort of premium plan with every major network. So for Verizon, AT&T, T-Mobile, I'm on one of each of their premium plans, and actually I switch around which one I'm on pretty regularly. But like that phone, that's running Verizon. This one I think is running AT&T, and if I have it right, this one's running T-Mobile on the sort of like fancy postpaid plans, which I feel like I ought to be on top of that. It's sort of ridiculous, but whenever they like change policies or something weird is going on, I don't want to have to like go into a store and sign up for 1 month or whatever. And then I have sort of like a rotating sequence of the sort of like more budget friendly, smaller carriers. So right now I've got an Xfinity Mobile one going. I've got this like niche carrier called Afani, which is like all about security and SIM swap prevention. They're a pretty cool concept they're working on there. And a lot of that, and I think there's probably a couple more, but I'm not even entirely sure which ones I have running right now.
That's a red flag right there. I've been in that situation.
Yeah, my basic thing is like if I'm giving if I'm regularly recommending to people a carrier, I like to like actually be using them if I'm throwing a lot of customers their way. I like the whole like eat your own dog food concept. I have one of those too, Dennis. Actually, I have like 3 of them. Yeah, it's ridiculous. But yeah, I think so. Right now I'm kind of like between things on my personal line, but my
what are you using personally? Like, what's your like?
I
what's
was
the
using
Chris
Mint.
number on?
Yeah, I was using Mint for my personal line, and then
Okay.
my sort of actual business line where I take a business call was running on that Verizon plan. Though I may switch the personal line over to US Mobile to really give that like a long-term try as my main number.
I gotta ask 2 things. One, you said you have Xfinity Mobile, so I'm assuming you have Xfinity then for your internet, I'm guessing.
Yeah, I do.
Gotcha. And then 2, none of us have been able to text Xfinity Mobile, so I want to ask you, like, I saw you recommended even on your website when I punched in my zip code. What's your experience been like? Because like Comcast as a whole, not known for great customer service, right? So I want to know what your experience has been like specifically with Xfinity Mobile.
Yeah. And I'll just say I sympathize with like qualms with Comcast as an internet provider, and I mean the fact that they rebranded to Xfinity was to kind of get away from the negative association that brand has. And I'm honestly like I'm really impressed by Xfinity Mobile. Their pricing is great on the buy the gig plans. Like yeah, I mean you could run like 10 lines with unlimited talk and text, and they all share like a tiny pool of data, and you could end up paying like $2 a line each month. So I mean, if you're really trying to like play the frugal game, it's an incredibly cheap way to get on like Verizon's network. And the unlimited plans are like they're decently priced. I think Visibles are a better price and pretty comparable.
Actually, they just did a new recent price change. Stetson, you posted a video on this, right, or not yet?
Oh my god, I made it, but the Patreon supporters haven't voted on it yet. Maybe I should rethink that system. But
Jesus, I was gonna say, but anyway, they came out with new unlimited pricing where
I wrote something about this too.
Yeah. I just had that look because we had Stetson had a heads up because of some people, and I was hoping he would have that, but oh well.
Yeah. So that is right. They are now more comparable with Visible than they were before. But their mix and match thing is also just really nice. Like I think a lot of families, my own family did this, when I was growing up in a really dumb way, where it was like we had two heavy data users, and instead of like, having my parents who used zero data go on some super cheap plan, we were paying for 4 or 5 line unlimited plan way more than we should have. And Xfinity, the way they let you mix and match between like the unlimited plan and the cheap plan, I think is really great. And I would love to see more of that out there. But I mean, definitely like the downside here is there's a shadow cost to Xfinity Mobile, and that's that you're more locked into your home internet. And so like, yeah, people should definitely like be mindful of that before they pull the trigger on Xfinity Mobile.
Well, as I joke about, it's not like you have a choice. I was gonna say it's Comcast or nothing. I mean, I guess I could rely on Los Mobile's hotspot, but like,
yeah. Where Dennis, you literally just have Comcast in your apartment, right?
Yeah, I mean, literally, you have to look long and hard. Like when I was looking for this house, I looked long and hard to make sure there was 2 options. That was Comcast and Fios. But it is very rare that you get 2 options. It's usually one or the other, right? Like I know Outward Sneed he has Cox, which we've heard his horror stories, which makes me feel so bad on the inside for him. Luckily, Comcast, despite their poor reputation, their service in and of itself hasn't actually been bad. I actually do get above my rated stuff. There's times where it gets a little bit wonky with packet loss, but there's lots of things that can affect that, especially when you're in an apartment complex, right? But overall, the service is fine. And their pricing's also fine-ish, as long as you're on a promo. I was gonna say, if you want a horror story though, Armstrong. Anybody out there, look up Armstrong Cable. Their pricing's outrageous. They really got you.
Yeah.
So wait,
I mean,
Chris,
that whole industry is a huge mess too. That one needs
that was number
more
2.
people
You're
going
trying to
after it.
decide cell phones or ISPs.
Yeah, sorry, say that one more time.
You were trying to decide between comparing cell phone plans or ISPs.
Oh yeah, and I even started trying to write some stuff about ISPs. Decided not to when I was getting CoverageCritic started, and now I'm sort of dipping my toes in it again.
Yeah, you got Starlink, we saw, right?
Yes, yeah. So I'm trialing Starlink right now. I'm super excited about it. I think it's just a super cool technology, and so far so good. I'm really impressed by it. I mean they've managed to bring down satellite internet has normally had this latency where you have a half-second delay or more on everything. There's no way you could play real-time games online or something. But Starlink's totally changing the game for that. You can get good speeds, not as good as you'd get with fiber providers or whatever, but you can get passable speeds, lowish latency, and I think it's going to be a game changer for a lot of people in rural areas, people who just don't have any good options. So I'm pretty excited, and even outside of America, it might be even a huger game changer.
What speed do you have with Comcast right now?
Comcast, I get about a gig down.
Oh, you're on their gigabit, so you got 1,000 down, 35 up.
Yeah, it's outrageous. I shouldn't be on the gigabit, but whatever.
I had their gigabit plan as well. In fact, I even had it when they did the speed increase up to 1,200. So then I was getting 1,400 down and 41 up because they were provisioned by about 10%. But they were charging me I want to say $114. And I had all these streaming services. I ended up reevaluating my budget because things happen in my work life. So I downgraded down to their Blast, which is 400 by 10. I'm gonna say best decision I made because I'm only paying $60.
I mean, there's very few use cases where the 400 versus the 1,000 matters.
The upload
Chris,
is what matters.
Earlier in the episode,
right.
Chris, you don't need more than 10 megabits per second to do anything on your phone.
So I mean, this was not my decision. So I as we were deciding this with my roommate, I was okay, I was totally in the frugal CoverageCritic mode, saying these are our options. We definitely don't want the fanciest one. There's no value to that. And my roommate's no, let's get the fastest one. And I'm are you sure? And he's yeah. So I'm okay, why not? When you're splitting it, the premium
cost,
feels
well,
less
I mean,
painful,
it's the upload speed, right? Honestly, when it comes to download speed, around the 400 mark is your sweet spot as far as today is concerned. But it's that upload, 10 megabits per second for me. The reason why I didn't get something slower or cheaper is because 10 megabits per second is the absolute bare bones minimum of what I can consider tolerable. If I got anything slower than this, I would like honestly start hurting myself because like Stetson, you saw how long it took to back up like a 20 gig thing of photos to the unlimited Google Drive storage with 10 meg upload. It took 2 days. Like it was so slow. And then like doing stuff like this with the webcam, man, like I think 8 megabits per second is what you need for like 1080p, right?
Yeah, I think we're like almost maxing you out right now.
Yeah, I'm like maxing out my upload my upload bandwidth, right? So like man, but that's why I'm excited for Fios, symmetrical gig, and I'm doing it for $75, so only a little bit more, and I get symmetrical.
This is hyped. So Chris, wait, are you paying for all of these major flagship plans on just like a single line by yourself?
Yeah, it's insane. I feel like given that I'm running a business in this space, it's like a justifiable expense.
Tax write-off.
Yeah. Not that there's a whole lot of value to get out of them when you have 7 plans running at the same time.
Wait, you have 7?
I mean, only 3 of them are these expensive.
Yeah, but those 3 are probably like $80. Actually, wait a minute. If you have the most premium, they're probably about $100 a shot. Then, if you have the most premium.
Yeah, so I kind of rotate across the different offerings. So like, I'm probably on like the Play More Unlimited of Verizon, which is like kind of in the middle of their premium options right now. But yeah, it also lets me, makes it really easy to review, each time they set out a new set of plans, and they do that all the time to keep people confused. They, as soon as they see that people are starting to figure things out, they make sure to throw a wrench in anybody's planning, and they're good at that.
Yeah, they're great at that. Jeez,
I can't say much either because I have 3 T-Mobile lines.
3 T-Mobile. What's the story there?
What are you doing?
They had a free line deal. There was a whole backstory about how it turned sour. I was like trying to take advantage of it, and boy, oh boy, did it get complicated. Long story short, I end up getting on Magenta Max, and I'm decently happy, and like everything is good again, for the most part. But it was all because I was trying to take advantage of a free line deal for like future proofing. In the event that I'd have to pull my AT&T line off my like dad's account at some point, it's there, or in the event that I get some other type of device in the future. But for right now, there was no point. I just want to take advantage of the free line deal that they had because I never took advantage of any of them. And I'm paying for 3 lines, or paying for 2 lines, which is like $140.
Funny enough, like you're probably paying the less amount of all of us. Like Chris and I have a lot of plans, and it's like ironic. We talk about helping people save money, and then our own personal
and then we waste money.
Yeah, just like through the roof expensive. Like you borderline could not get more expensive with what we're paying.
I mean, I know with your AT&T thing, because I know that was like expensive. In fact, if you would have had to go to the store, which you should really share that store on the after show, you would have literally paid for like a full month of service to activate all those lines.
Unreal.
But
Unreal.
circling back around real quick, you said you're getting your feet wet in this ISP space, right? Mm-hmm. My question for you, Chris, is how are you going to test all these different ISPs? Like, do you know buddies up here in Pennsylvania to try out like RCN or something, or how are you going to end up testing all these different ISPs?
Yeah, I'm not planning to hand test every single one. I mean, some of these would just be almost impossible because you have these like municipal things in one city. Stetson, do you have Nextlight?
Yeah, I do.
Longmont has what I've heard is an amazing like local
Nextlight
one.
is incredible.
Yeah. No way I could like test every one of those. It would be more of trying to just help people find like in the city these are your options. Give them a full list, and then for like the really big players, if I thought that one of the nationwide or nationwide-ish ISPs was like being deceptive or having really like anti-customer policies, then I might like write an article talking about it. But I don't think I'd try to go as in depth.
Every single one of them.
Yeah. I mean, it's like I'm not even sure I'm going to try to break into that industry. I probably am biting off more than I can chew with just the cell phone stuff. But I'm seeing if the little internet pages get any kind of traction.
Well, I mean, I said every single one of them because you said anti-competitive policies. Like
yes.
Yes, so every single ISP.
Yeah. I think that's about right.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if you saw this real quick, but for the net neutrality repeal, the cable providers literally paid firms who inappropriately use like real people's names to like submit like comments like in favor of repealing net neutrality. Did you see that? It was like
I saw it when it first started to get exposed. I saw something about it, and then I like saw a headline more recently of like, yeah, this definitely happened or something. it sounds awful. I haven't like dug into it deep enough to like have a real opinion about it, but I mean it sounds ridiculous. Does it sound like the carriers knew what they were doing? Or sorry, not carriers, the ISPs, or did they like hire another agency and then the agency did some crazy thing?
I mean, they hired out different companies to do it for their behalf and stuff. But the point being, it's legitimate fraud. Like they were literally like stealing people's names, like you and I, and like making accounts in our names with our information and saying that like we were saying this. And on the opposite end, there was like one like little like young dude who had like a bot account that he was making like a bunch of comments in favor. But literally, I think the report was like 98% of the comments posted with either bots or paid off comments. Like only like 2% were legit comments.
That's insane. And if they knew this was going on or like they failed to do due diligence they should have, I hope the FCC or whatever body is in charge comes down real hard on them. Yeah.
Well, maybe that will happen now that we don't have Ajit Pai in place.
Yeah.
We'll have to wait and see. Well, we've been going for over an hour now, so Chris, I want to thank you for taking your time and chatting with us. Everyone who's watching or listening, you can find Chris at CoverageCritic.com. I'll paste the link in the chat and the show notes so you can check it out. And you can actually go to the site, literally enter your zip code, and see what Chris has compiled from the FCC data to see what network probably has the best coverage in your area. And Chris, anything else you want to share? Anything you're working on, or I don't know, anything you want to leave the audience with?
Just thank you all for watching. It's been a lot of fun, and yeah, thank you Stetson and Dennis for hosting. This has been great.
Sweet. Yeah, well, thank you guys so much for listening. We really appreciate it. Stay tuned for the after show if you're interested in that. And that's going to be it for this episode. Thank you, and have a great day.
Peace.
Bye, everybody.